For the first time in more than 5 decades, Bangladesh has issued new banknotes that no longer have an image of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. Joining us is Professor Veena Sikri. Professor Sikri is a former Indian High Commissioner to Bangladesh. Ambassador Sikri, welcome to DD India News Hub. Now,
thank you.
I don't know about others, but speaking for myself, I cannot for the life of me imagine or wrap my head around the fact that a country's founder could go from being a hero to a villain overnight. How did things come to such a pass that Bangladesh has so spectacularly turned its back on Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman?
And you know, this was the entire raison d'etre, as it were, of ousting Sheikh Hasina in August last year. It was called a students' revolution. It was not a students' uprising at all. It really had the Jamaat-e-Islami, the radical Islamist forces behind it, and these were backed by Pakistan to certain sections of the army and, of course, the deep state under President Joe Biden. And actually, the Jamaat-e-Islami's objective was to reverse whatever had happened in 1971. If you recall, in August of last year, the very minute that Sheikh Hasina left Dhaka, the first visual that came out were of mobs trying to break down huge life-size bronze statues of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the founder of the nation, the father of the nation. And they were doing that everywhere that they saw his name written or his statue there or any institution named after him was completely destroyed. And this effort has continued, even his home, which had been turned into a museum in Dhanmondi. That was, in August itself, it was very much broken down, but then later on it was burnt to the ground. You know, they were not even satisfied with destroying it. They said, no, we will burn it to the ground. And that's what they did. You are showing the visuals of that. So it has really been one big effort over the last 7 to 8 months of destroying the entire heritage of the Awami League, quite forgetting that under Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, they had 6 to 7% rate of growth. They had risen from the least developed countries category, which is quite remarkable for any country. But now in just 8 or 9 months, that rate of growth has been halved or less than halved. And I think there's so much poverty, there's so many factories closed, so much joblessness, high inflation in Bangladesh that the people are really in a very, very poor and unimaginably difficult condition. But still, the Jamaat-e-Islami and the radical forces are only bent on this one effort of wiping out the memory of the liberation war. And that is why they have now changed the currency notes. Indeed. And removed the image of Bangabandhu from the currency notes, which I agree with you, which is quite remarkably, a remarkable distasteful, I would say. Nobody would ever dream in India of removing the image of Mahatma Gandhi from our currency notes. You know, it is one of the long-lasting, everlasting, memories of India's fight for independence. And now to see that they're trying to change all this, they're going to have a July declaration, I believe. They might try to change the constitution. They would, say this is the second republic, as if the first republic never existed, like they have in France, So it's a very dangerous situation.
It is indeed dangerous. Ambassador Sikri, help our viewers understand something else as well. Is the negation of Mujib's legacy a knee-jerk reaction or a considered, deliberate response? Was it a spontaneous outburst, or did generations of Bangladeshis carry an animus towards Mujib which spilled out into the open during the protests of last year?
No, I think, in fact, the last 9 months have shown that the love for Sheikh Mujib, the memory of the liberation war, the respect and regard that Bangladesh youth and most of the population have for the liberation war, that is still intact. It is very much intact. And in fact, it is only after noticing and appreciating that actually the Awami League vote bank is intact. The 35 to 40% vote bank of the Awami League is more or less intact. Despite a huge campaign against Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, describing her as fascist, describing her as having committed crimes against humanity. Now there's a case launched against her. Despite all of that, despite the vilification of India, saying that India is what made Sheikh Hasina do all this and creating this vicious anti-India campaign. But all this has boomeranged actually
Right.
on Mohammed Yunus, and you're seeing that it is now an act of desperation, because having realized that the initial campaigns and vilification campaigns and so on have boomeranged, and that the vote bank of the Awami League is actually intact. They have now banned the Awami League, which actually they're not even authorized to do, because this is a interim regime. They have no authority to do anything except prepare for and conduct the next elections with the Election Commission.
Right.
And instead of doing that, they are trying by every means possible to destroy the memory of the Liberation War, to destroy the memory of the Awami League, and they are more and more cozying up with Pakistan. Again,
Which brings me to another equally perplexing thing about the Bangladesh of 2025, Ambassador Sikri. What is worse than erasing or scrubbing Mujib's legacy is to befriend Pakistan, the very country and its people who were responsible for the genocide of Bangladeshis during the Liberation War of 1971. Do you think this behavior is quite beyond the pale?
Absolutely. I think that they tried this again, together with wiping out the memory of the Liberation War. They tried to again get Pakistan back. They've been visited at high levels, and there's talk of Mohammed Yunus going there and Shehbaz Sharif coming here. But obviously, they've not been able to implement that because there's no response from the people on that. The people cannot take in the fact that the very country that committed genocide, that committed mass-scale rapes and killings and lynchings, you still have Biranganas who have suffered rape at the hand of the Pakistan army, and and they're living very difficult lives in Bangladesh. But now to try and bring back Bangladesh, to bring back Pakistan, and say that we should be friends, we should have military relationship. And they've tried to do all that. But I must say that, at this stage, there is a fairly straightforward standoff between the Bangladesh army and Mohammed Yunus, because Mohammed Yunus then tried to even establish a corridor with Myanmar, what is called a humanitarian corridor, but everybody suspects it's a corridor to supply arms to the Arakan army. And the Bangladesh army took a position against it and said this corridor is not acceptable and they would not allow it to happen, and that Mohammed Yunus is not keeping them informed. So actually, this is the standoff still continues. Bangladesh is trying to implement the corridor, saying there'll be a special military zone. The Bangladesh army has said there is no such decision. So in the midst of all this, again, Bangladesh is the Bangladesh regime under Mohammed Yunus is trying to drum up some kind of support by saying let's change the currency note. And I think these kind of steps are increasingly repugnant to the people of Bangladesh. Increasingly they don't want such things to happen. They want to go back to the memory of the Liberation War. They want to go back to their status as an independent country, which is coming out of poverty, which is developing well, where people are getting jobs, where people are getting a good education, and all that is changing and making the people very unhappy. Mohammed Yunus implemented so many adverse trade situations with India, trying to reduce the import of Indian goods, thinking that then they would get goods from other countries. But even that didn't work, because when you try to get these goods like cotton or cotton yarn or pharmaceuticals or textile machinery coming from India, these were all inputs into Bangladesh's own exports. And it was actually giving value added, because they were getting goods at very reasonable prices, very short supply chain, just a few days. But trying to get these goods from Pakistan or Egypt or Brazil or USA is adding weeks and weeks and adding money. And so the factories are closing down. People are losing jobs. Orders are being cancelled. Orders are being replaced. So it's really affecting the economy of Bangladesh. And this is making the people increasingly dissatisfied with the interim regime's government. And now the very next issue of clash is the date of the next elections. Because Bangladesh says they want, the Yunus regime says they want so-called reforms. The interim regime is not authorized to do any reforms except to have the elections. But he's ordered a whole set of reforms, constitutional reforms, electoral reforms, police reforms, committees have been formed, reports have been given, and there are interviews being given saying, yes, reforms can happen with elections. But the people don't want that. They want the elections to happen and let the elected government, whoever it is, the elections should be free, fair and inclusive. There should be a question of banning any large party like the Awami League. And whoever wins in the elections, it's fine. They will come form the parliament, and then look at whatever kind of government and whatever kind of governance they like.
Right. In conclusion, Ambassador Sikri, I have a twofold question to you. One, how do you assess or appraise Mujib's legacy, number one? And number two, how does negating Mujib's contributions help an average Bangladeshi? And more importantly, do you think the people will live to regret it?
Yes, I say certainly they will live to regret it. Mujib's legacy, what he gave into the Constitution of Bangladesh, the 1972 Constitution, was very clear. It was based on democracy, on nationalism, on secularism, and social justice. And these are the four pillars of the Bangladesh Constitution, which has stood the country in very good stead. They have a sizable population of minorities, the Hindu minority, the Christian minority, the Buddhist minority, and many other minorities also. And we know that in August last year, when Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina left the country, the first target, even before her plane had probably left Bangladesh airspace, but their first target was the minority population.
Right.
And there were tremendous, vicious attacks on the minority population, very reminiscent of 1971, trying to force the minority to leave Bangladesh, killings and rapings and looting, the expropriation of property, closing down the business houses, forcing professors, Hindu professors and Christian professors to resign, forcing teachers, primary school teachers to resign. Even judges were asked to give up their posts. So it's a completely anarchic, lawless regime with no authority to do all that they have been doing. And the people have seen through this. The people are expressing their dissatisfaction with this. They're not showing any support. The rallies that even the so-called students who say they led this uprising against Sheikh Hasina, but they're not students at all. They're actually various factions of the Jamaat-e-Islami or other Islamist groups. Islamist people are in the advisory regime of Muhammad Yunus.
Right.
They're not supposed to be there. It's supposed to be an apolitical interim regime which only conducts elections, but you have members of Islamist parties and organizations like Repertoire Islam, Islami Andolan Bangladesh. This is completely unacceptable to the people. They've seen that this is not what they want. And I think they are all more and more keen that the elections should be held very quickly, free, fair, and inclusive.
Indeed. Ambassador Sikri, thank you for joining us and sharing your perspective with our viewers in India and around the world. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.